Well, colleagues, I think you'll agree we've had a very rich diet of presentations this morning. We have overrun a little. I received a nod from the organizer to say that we can just run over a little into the lunch hour and shorten lunch in the interests of some general discussion, but of course there will be opportunities to talk informally with all the speakers during the day. So may I invite questions to either the panel as a whole or to individual speakers, please. Right, please.
Thank you.
Could you just identify yourself?
My name is Villamar from Mexico. I'm working at the University of National University of Singapore. It caught my attention very much, the project of data collecting and the networks complexity, because I think precisely one of the most important things is to incorporate the Pacific into this picture, this big picture of the different oceans, because there is a lot of information but not systematized in such a way in which put together elements of the silver trading, the different interpretation of space in the Pacific that were growing also in America regarding Asia. Thank you very much.
That's a very helpful comment. I think that doesn't necessarily require a response. Questions or comments, please? Yes, in the middle.
Thank you. It was a very fascinating session. Question for Evelyn. You mentioned that you can view like Manila or Philippines as extension of the Americas from the point of view of the Spaniards. But I wonder whether it's just a very crafty way of them kind of like going around the fact of the Tordesillas line, because since that's going to be west of it, they can claim everything. They just simply claim all the way to Philippines. And that's one question. I wonder whether the question makes sense. I can't hear you
very well because I hear an echo. What did he say, Siew Ann?
Oh. Tordesillas lines.
Huh?
The Tordesillas Treaty.
Oh, Tordesillas line. No, the Tordesillas line gave the Philippines to Spain. That's why they were in a hurry to get there.
You know, because there was some controversy whether Philippines lay east or west of the Tordesillas line because they didn't know how big the globe was. So is it a very crafty way of the Spaniards of saying, let's just say that the Philippines is the west, or it's part of the Americas and it's totally west, so it is all ours?
Maybe.
I don't know.
You have an answer to I don't have an answer to
Oh, okay.
We'll leave that question hanging in the air, and perhaps someone can help us with it.
Anybody else in the audience might know.
I know. You have an answer to that?
Yeah.
Help us out, please.
I'd just like to say, Evelyn, those of us who work in this area, when we see maps, you can't help but notice that line separating the Spanish side from the Portuguese side moves around a lot. I've seen maps where that line of what Spanish owns goes right up to east of Malacca. They couldn't quite bring themselves to try to claim Malacca because the Portuguese were already there. But that line, what my colleague is saying, moves all the way from east of the Philippines to very far over, dependent upon who drew the map. And I think that's what's so interesting about the map projects. So that's one question for you. But I have a question for you about how the Chinese in Manila and Mexico see themselves. I don't know how long you've been here, but are you aware of, in Southeast Asia, the Peranakan community? Do the overseas Chinese who remain in the Philippines today and in Mexico, do they see themselves as part of a greater diaspora that includes Southeast Asia? Do they consider themselves part of the Peranakan community?
You know, whether it's Singapore or Manila, 90%, if not more, of those migrants in the early centuries were all men. And men being men, they're not going to sit home at night, right? So they eagerly enjoy the company of local women. And what happened in the Philippines, however, because it's part of the extension of New Spain and of the Spanish Empire, they had a different nomenclature, different terminology. The mixed race were not called Peranakan, they were called mestizos, which they took from America, mestizo, mixed race. They called the local people indios. No? So they use American terms in the Philippines for these ethnic and racial phenomena. Yes, of course, and the mestizos is a term that still exists in the Philippines today.
Evelyn, thank you. I think, Angelo, you had a comment to make about an earlier point.
Well, yes, it's just we can see that cosmographic ideas relevant to the cultural and political construction of space do always move. So these Tordesillas lines and later on meridians was quite disputed. But also the very idea of what the New World was is that seems clear, no? Is the Americas? No, it's not. Around in the time of Manila and this expansion in the Pacific, the new China became the New World from a Spanish point of view or political or empire perspective. So it's the Tordesillas line is the New World concept that travels around the world. But thank you.
Thank you. Other point? Yes, please. The microphone up onto the...
But I have more questions.
Well, 2 points, sir. Firstly, with regard to Evelyn, I think yours is a class of your own. So I think thank you for the eloquence, dedication, and conviction. Thank you. Now, with regard to, the other speakers, now, as you notice that, the question of that, the 6th element of pattern that you have, plus the 2, event and record, but is that the algorithm? Because we don't see the algorithm. Have you established the algorithm in your formulation? Or you're still in the making and work in progress? Thank you very much.
Siew Ann or Andrea, would you like to respond?
Okay, so so what we've presented is a pilot study. So we don't yet have someone working full time to do this systematically. Because there are the 6 elements of a narrative, and in fact, because of the ways the records are constructed, once you identify key periods and key events, you automatically know who the key actors are, where the key locations are, and of course the discovery of the why, what is the reason for these things happening. Those would require more in-depth study by the human expert, the historian. Now, I of course show one instance of a complex network motif that will allow us to identify key events. I think I did say that is not the only one, but we don't know how many different types there are unless we actually do a systematic study where we first perform a segmentation of the events. Then at the turning point, at the switching point between events, between different periods, we can look for the signatures that will then help us find more of these kind of switching events.
Please.
Thank you. Thank you for that rich panel. I have a question for Angelo. You beautifully excavated sort of the various complex layers of the Mappa Mundi, the Framaro's map, and you were arguing that the aim was not to document what was happening, but I'm curious to know whether we have any sort of sources that speak about how it was used. It's very large. It was, I think maybe Andrea mentioned it was very large. It couldn't be taken on a ship. And I'm reminded of the Namban Byobu that I made about 150 years later in Japan, which weren't taken, of course, on ships. But what do we have in terms of who may have seen it? I mean, is this some kind of protected secret knowledge? All this accumulation of it. And that also connects me to a question to Evelyn. I'm really struck by all the Asian objects that are moving to Acapulco and then to Mexico City. And I'm curious to know whether you've come across any records that speak about artists, Chinese artists moving from Manila on the Manila Galleon. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. it's not simple to provide a short and at the same time detailed answer. Yes, we have documents that show very well the way in which the map was used from, let's say, 1480 until well into the 19th century. And let me just give you two quick examples. Late 15th and mid 16th century. The map was defined by Ramusio as one of the miracles of these divine cities and was part of the relics that were displayed to visitors. And why? Because it was used to show that that particular map, and implicitly Venetian Koine, Venetian culture, predicted the discoveries. So it was used to show that in a moment in which Venice was declining, the power balance was going in favor of the Iberian Peninsula, the map was used by Ramusio to say, yes, we knew this before you, or the others. Let's jump to the 19th century. We have three groups of people using Fra Mauro's map. The first, a future pope belonging to the Camaldolese orders and a cardinal, Placido Zurla. They wrote the first monograph, one of the first monographs, entirely devoted or on a mappamundi. And why? The idea is, in the very moment in which the Enlightenment people, are shutting down the religious orders, we were the ones who created modernity, who anticipated the discovery. So we have a pope who wrote a monograph on a map, Gregory XVI. In the very same year, people from the East India Company funded the same size manuscript copy that is now in the British Library. And why? The idea was, first there was Alexander the Great, then Marco Polo, of which Fra Mauro is a representation, and then here we are. So we want the map. They believe the map to be the original map of Marco Polo. A few years later, this copy, nowadays in the British Museum, was used by a Portuguese prime minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, exiled to Paris, in a colonial dispute with the French, in order to prove that they reached Africa before the French in a kind of 19th century colonial dispute. And he called this Venetian map the most Portuguese of maps. So you have the same maps used in the same years by three different groups of people in the 19th century. I don't know if this can give you the taste, the sense of how maps can be used over the centuries. But Evelyn, maybe you want to.
Angelo, thank you very much. I think, colleagues, I really ought now, I think in the interests of essential refreshment to keep us in good form for this afternoon, we should break for lunch. But I think those of us who've been privileged to sit out and listen to the speakers will agree that we've benefited from a very rich diet of exposition this morning. There's lots of issues been raised about the nature of maps as aggregators or not, the degree of conscious or unconscious decision making in their content. What is it that led to that Silk Road that Evelyn's been talking about to be the forgotten, the first word of her title? Lots of issues that I think we might want to pick up on informally with the speakers over lunch and as the conference progresses. But for now, may I invite us all to thank our panel this morning, Siew Ann, Evelyn, Andrea, and Angelo. Thank you very much. I think we